The first week passed uneventfully, save for the occasional creaks and groans of the old building. She chalked them up to settling wood and old pipes. But as days turned to nights, the unsettling feeling began to creep in, the sensation that she wasn't alone. One evening, as she sat on her worn couch scrolling through her phone, she noticed a shadow flicker across the corner of her living room. She froze, her eyes darting to the spot. Nothing was there. Shrugging it off, she returned to her phone, but the feeling lingered. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard a faint scratching noise. It wasn't the rustle of mice or the distant sound of wind through cracks. It was deliberate, rhythmic, as if someone, or something, was tracing their fingers along the walls. She held her breath, heart pounding in her chest, but the sound stopped as suddenly as it started. By the third week, the shadows grew bolder. Sarah began noticing them in the corners of her vision, dark shapes lingering for a moment before disappearing when she turned to look. They weren't cast by furniture or streetlights. They seemed to move with intention, independent of the room's light. One night, as she was brushing her teeth, she caught a glimpse of something in the mirror. A tall, shadowy figure stood behind her, featureless and dark. Her toothbrush clattered into the sink as she spun around, but there was nothing there. The bathroom felt colder, though, the air heavy like it had been sucked out of the room. Desperate for answers, Sarah called her best friend Megan, who was skeptical but agreed to stay over for moral support. That night, they both sat in the living room, laughing and trying to shake off the tension. But as midnight approached, the atmosphere changed. The lights began to dim and flicker, the temperature plummeted, and a deep silence blanketed the apartment. "What the hell was that?" Megan whispered, clutching Sarah's arm. Before Sarah could answer, a dark shape slithered along the ceiling, disappearing into the hallway. Megan gasped, and Sarah felt a cold sweat break out across her skin. Determined to prove she wasn't imagining things, Sarah grabbed her phone and began recording. "If you're here, show yourself," she called out, her voice trembling. For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of the refrigerator. Then, a shadow emerged from the corner of the room, stretching and twisting unnaturally as it grew larger. Megan screamed, and the phone clattered to the floor as Sarah felt an overwhelming pressure in her chest. The shadow loomed over them, its form pulsating as if alive. Though it had no eyes, Sarah felt its gaze boring into her. The figure seemed to dissolve into a pool of darkness, seeping into the floor. The lights returned to normal, and the heavy atmosphere lifted. But neither woman could move, their bodies paralyzed with fear. Megan refused to stay another night, leaving Sarah alone. Exhausted and terrified, Sarah tried to sleep but awoke at 3 a.m., unable to move. A shadow figure stood at the foot of her bed, its form more solid than before. As it leaned closer, she felt its cold presence pressing against her, its whispering voice like static in her ears. "You belong to us." The next morning, Sarah packed a bag and left the apartment, vowing never to return. She moved in with her sister, hoping to leave the shadows behind. But the phenomenon followed her. Shadows flickered across her sister's walls. The whispers returned, growing louder each night. Sarah began to understand. These weren't just hallucinations. They were entities, feeding on her fear, growing stronger with each encounter, and no matter where she went, they would follow. Months later, Sarah disappeared. Her sister found her apartment untouched, her belongings still packed in boxes. The only clue was her phone, left on the nightstand. The last video recorded was chilling, the shadow figure in her bedroom standing over her as she slept. Sarah was never seen again, but neighbors in her old apartment swear they hear whispers in the night and see flickering shadows that linger too long. The shadows, it seems, are always watching.